Gemar Chatima Tova. The world was changing the summer before I first headed off to college. The Soviet Union had fallen, and Jews from behind the once locked Iron Curtain began making their way home to Israel. Emboldened by the promise of a new stream of talented, determined, and educated Russian immigrants, Yitzhak Rabin ran to become Israel's prime minister with the promise of pursuing peace with the Palestinians and finally ending the conflict. Like so many people my age, boy, was I excited when Rabin was elected in June of 1992. A few weeks after his election, Rabin addressed the Israeli Knesset and made his intentions to pursue peace clear. In his call for reconciliation and joining an international movement towards peace, Rabin reached back thousands of years to a famous phrase from our tradition. He said, "No longer are we necessarily a people that dwells apart." A people that dwells apart. These are actually the words of a sorcerer from thousands of years ago, a sorcerer who was hired by a hateful king to curse the Jewish people. And the story is preserved in the book of Numbers. Imagine it's a Lord of the Rings type situation. The evil sorcerer Bilam climbs to the peak of a mountain overlooking the Israelite people below. He holds up his powerful hands and delivers a fateful curse, condemning the Israelites for eternity to be a nation that dwells apart. Am livadad yishkon. Am livadad yishkon, a nation that dwells apart. For thousands of years, Jews have felt the sting of Bilam's curse. Isolation, rejection, vulnerability. And that is exactly what Rabin hoped to end. By making peace with the Palestinians, Rabin intended to finally break the sorcerer's curse and finally secure Israel's place in the family of nations. We all know the tragic end to the story. Rabin was assassinated. Peace was never achieved. And now, a year since October 7th, Israel finds itself a pariah in the international community. More now than ever, we are a Am Livadad Yishkon, a nation that dwells apart. We feel the sting of isolation in the UN, at The Hague, in the streets and parliaments across Europe, on the editorial pages of our nation's largest newspapers, scrolling through social media, and most recently, all over our college campuses. But the interesting thing is that throughout the 2,000 years that we dwelled in exile, peripatetic, bouncing from place to place, never fully accepted, never fully at home, our rabbis saw the designation of Am Livadad Yishkon, a people, a nation that dwells apart, not as a curse, but rather as a blessing. In the term Am Livadad Yishkon, the rabbis saw the blessing of solidarity and the strength of a people that stands together. It's precisely this, our peoplehood, our sense of shared connection and destiny, that will navigate us through these perilous times. And that's what I'd like to explore with you today. Many of you have asked about my trip to Israel this summer. In passing, during small talk, I shared that it was a complicated time. I want to dive deeper into that with you today. I've been in Israel 3 times since October 7th. I went at the end of November with a delegation of Los Angeles rabbis. I led an Adat Ariel mission through the JNF in January, and I went to study with rabbis from around the world in July. At the end of November, more than anything, I was struck and inspired by the united sense of purpose and direction of the country. In the blink of an eye, Israelis put aside the very contentious debate over the judicial reforms and vowed to emerge from October 7th together in victory. Everywhere you turned, there were messages of unity. On the small little computer screens at airport passport control, running up and down the grand Azrieli Towers in Tel Aviv, on the digital menus at aroma coffee shops. And this was my favorite, on the plastic wrappers of toilet paper packages. In right-wing nationalist yeshivas and in progressive gatherings at Tel Aviv's Hostage Square. They all adopted the same language of unity. B'yachad ninatzeach. Together we will win. The singularity of purpose was truly beautiful. Several weeks later, in January, when the Adat Ariel mission arrived, the unity was still present, but cracks were becoming apparent. One night in Jerusalem at a rally in support of the hostages, in addition to B'yachad ninatzeach, together we will win, there were select voices scattered throughout the night, calling for change in an approach of the government. And over the next several months, those voices got a lot stronger. I returned to Israel in July before the situation had heated up with Hezbollah and Iran. And with the war in its 10th month and all eyes on Gaza, in the heat of the summer, the unity melted away. After Shabbat, I went to a rally in Tel Aviv, where an impatient crowd chanted, Akshav, now, get a deal done, Akshav, Machzirim otam habayita, bring them home, Akshav, now, Akshav, now, end the war, Bibi, Akshav, now, make a deal, Akshav. A few days later, I stumbled across a very different rally in northern Jerusalem, honoring the recently fallen soldiers. The rally was being held at a busy intersection across the street from a popular movie theater. I was there, I gotta confess, to see a movie. But when I saw the demonstration, I ditched the movie and spent the evening walking around at the rally. Protesters were handing out stickers with pictures of fallen soldiers. On the stickers, alongside pictures of the deceased, was a different message from what I heard in Tel Aviv. Ad hanitzachon, until victory. In honor of the ultimate sacrifice paid by these soldiers, ad hanitzachon, until victory is achieved. Execute the war until victory, when the terrorist threats are removed from Israel's borders. Ad hanitzachon, until victory. Destroy Hamas, push back Hezbollah, and deter Iran. Ad hanitzachon, until victory. At that rally, one man with a long black beard and a large and knitted kippah, typically worn by religious Zionists, shared with me that his brother had been wounded in Gaza. He told me that it was his brother's honor to make that sacrifice, but that the sacrifice would be in vain if the government didn't do more to eradicate the threat of Hamas and the other radicals endangering Israel. Don't allow the blood of my brother and all the others to be spilled in vain, he told me. We must push forward. Now Gaza, then Hezbollah, and finally Iran, ad hanitzachon, until victory. These two demonstrations were calling for very different things. In Tel Aviv, akshav, now, make a deal. And in Jerusalem, ad hanitzachon, until victory. The truth is that most people in Israel feel a degree of both. Akshav, yes, make a deal to get those hostages, but not at the expense of nitzachon, not at the expense of dealing with the terrorist threats. And on the other side, those calling for a further military push realize that every day that the war continues, hope for the hostages dim. Wherever one lands between akshav and ad hanitzachon, most people know that there are really no good solutions, only less bad options. A bloody war now for future quiet, or a more tempered immediate plan allowing the threat to fester until tomorrow. It's all a question of time, and what a warped way to need to think about time. The warping of time. That's just how I felt this past year when I spent time visiting the kibbutzim attacked on October 7th. When I visited kibbutz Kfar Aza in December, the Sukkot from October were still standing. The winter wind whirled about, crashing into the canopies and tarps, but there the Sukkot stood. The people who had built them had either been killed, kidnapped, or evacuated. But there the Sukkot stood, bringing us back to October, frozen in time. And this summer, as I opened the shot-up doors of Kibbutz Nir Oz's dining hall and stepped inside a scorching hot room littered with burnt-out kitchen equipment, shards of glass, and charred wooden beams, the community bulletin board at the entrance to the hall caught my eye. At the top of the board was a calendar from last October. Like the Sukkot from Kfar Aza, standing through the winter wind, the incinerated dining hall of Kibbutz Nir Oz, baking in the summer sun, remained frozen in October 2023. So how do we step forward from the past year of warped time? As we mark a year since October 7th, how do we turn the page from October 7th, not to forget the past, but in order to live in the present and build a future? For me, the answer was found on the bulletin board in the Kibbutz Nir Oz dining hall. Below the calendar from October was a beautiful, colorful flyer covered in dirt and dust. The flyer advertised a concert that sadly never happened, For the opening of the season on October 10th, the chamber opera singers of Ashdod were supposed to give a concert, and they were supposed to sing Rodgers and Hammerstein's famous song from the musical Carousel, "You'll Never Walk Alone." Here's how the song goes. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, for your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on, with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. And that, according to authors Dan Sinor and Saul Singer, is the genius of Israel. In their recently released book, The Genius of Israel, Sinor and Singer argue that more valuable than the emerging business markets, high-tech innovation, natural gas reserves, or creative water conservation, in a country where there is often divided government, Israel's determined investment in a reservoir of social solidarity is its single greatest resource. Seeing cracks in Israeli society, much from the debate over the Judicial Reform Initiative, Sinor and Singer wrote this book to urge Israel to get back to what it does best, standing together. For this social solidarity, they claim, is the true genius of Israel. The book was released only a little over a month after October 7th, and it's needed now more than ever. I had the opportunity to hear Singer speak this summer in Jerusalem. During the talk, he asked, how can a country that experiences such existential angst rank as the 5th happiest country in the world? Singer offered that Israel is a happy country because it is a society that more than anything values and celebrates connection and belonging. A few examples. In America, the individual with the best test scores gets into the finest universities. In Israel, only those who work well with others are accepted into the most elite parts of the army. In Israel, most families, 3 or 4 generations, secular and religious alike, gather every week for Shabbat dinner. And in Israel, young adults spend their formative years not finding themselves in college, but working together in service to a greater good, the defense of Israel. In America, the rallying cry for freedom is Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty" or "Give me death." The focus is on the individual. Israel's call for freedom is expressed in the collective, "Lihiot am chovshi," to be a free people. While in many Western countries, the rights of the individual are valued above all else, in Israel, connection with others, living the words of the Hatikvah, is the truest sign of hope. Israel's problems are many. Her issues are complex. There is a low threshold for representation in the Knesset, with too many political parties with far too much political power, resulting in an often paralyzed government that cannot address the bigger issues, the role of the ultra-Orthodox in society, what types of power to grant the judiciary, how to deal with the Palestinians, how to prepare for Iran, and how to fight the war in Gaza, Akshav or Ad HaNitzachon, or something in between. With so many deeply important issues facing the country, Israel's past success is the key to her future, our ability to walk together. Unfortunately, Yitzhak Rabin's vision of being accepted into the family of nations has not been realized yet. We still remain an Am Livadad Yishkon, a nation that dwells apart. But as our sages remind us, this curse can also be a great blessing, a blessing of unity and solidarity. It reminds me of one of my saddest moments ever in Israel. I was living in Jerusalem in 2002 during the height of the Second Intifada. It felt like an impossible time, much like today. Throughout the year, terror attacks filled the news and emptied the streets. Early that spring, one of my favorite neighborhood restaurants, Cafe Moment, was attacked by a suicide bomber. I remember running home that evening among police cars, army vehicles, loud sirens, and ambulance after ambulance after ambulance. I woke up early the next morning, and something compelled me to walk over to the cafe. When I arrived, there were maybe 24 people. Most of them were family of victims. There was this one family. They had clearly lost someone in the attack, and tears streamed down their cheeks, and their bodies convulsed in pure despair. Another passerby, taking his dog out for a morning walk, saw me watching this family. He saw that as I watched this family cry, I too was crying, and I couldn't move. I was frozen in space and time, like the sukkahs on Kfar Aza and the calendar in Nir Oz. The man stopped alongside me, put his arm around me, and said, "We will go on. Namshich. We will go on together." The man could have left me to cry alone, but that's not Israel. The genius of Israel is seeing the pain of a stranger and saying, "Namshich. We will go on together." After 55 days of absolute hell living in Hamas captivity, on November 30th, Sapir Cohen of the Nir Oz kibbutz was released in the final prisoner swap. This is what she shared in an interview about her time in captivity. One of my captors called me to watch Al Jazeera when they were showing footage of the hostage square. I saw tens of thousands of Israelis united in purpose, and it filled me with hope. The captor smiled, interlocked his fingers into two fists, and said, "When all the Jews are like this, it's strong, strong, strong. But we'll wait a bit. There'll be chaos among you." It was then that I understood that they are acutely aware of our vulnerabilities and know that our greatest threat comes from within. This is why we don't need to share the same opinions, but rather respect each other, practice tolerance, and remember that we're all one family. In Hamas captivity, the most unlikely of places, Sapir Cohen learned the most critical of lessons that any rabbi can preach on Yom Kippur: the necessity of upholding the ancient words of the Torah as a blessing. Am livadad yishkon. a nation that dwells apart, standing together. The absurdity of the world leaves us feeling frozen in a warped sense of time, unsure of which direction to turn. During the summer, the discussion was Akshav or Ad HaNitzachon. The other week, it was Hezbollah and Lebanon, and now it's Iran. Israel is located in a bad neighborhood where moral people facing a determined and diabolical enemy will most certainly disagree about what to do. There will be setbacks, challenges, and disagreements. The political path is one where the best solution may only be the least bad. Still, we know the sukkahs of the past will eventually blow away in the winter winds. The days go on, even if the faded calendar on the wall still says October 7th. Despite the peril of the path, our faith in the future is rooted in the genius of our past. The secret of our past, the genius of Israel, is our social solidarity. Remember the words that the singers of the Ashdod Chamber Opera never got to sing. For your dreams be tossed and blown, walk on, with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. Despite our differences and disagreements, when the pain of the present leaves us broken, paralyzed in place, and feeling isolated in this world, as long as we continue to reach out to one another, namshich, we will go on. We will reinforce the genius of Israel. We will go on as one people, Am Livadad Yishkon, a nation that dwells apart. We will all go on together. Gamar Chatima Tova.